Welcome to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Coming up, we'll review the week's top stories about former President Donald Trump making waves with his appearance at a conference in Chicago and the state of Illinois' economy. I'll then join the Center Square's Brett Rowland to further discuss those stories and more. That's ahead with Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Here are some of the top stories from the past week. Illinois took center stage in national politics this week after former President Donald Trump made comments about Vice President Kamala Harris's race. Trump made headlines for comments about Harris in Chicago with the National Association of Black Journalists Wednesday.
Because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Harris later said it's the same old show from Trump. The Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker told CNN that Trump is not the right person for America.
When Donald Trump, of course, was not just disrespectful, but showed his true nature. And I think the rest of us can see the racism coming through. I mean, this guy is a homophobe, a xenophobe. He's a racist, a misogynist. And he shows it every day.
Pritzker also said Trump doesn't have the stamina to take on Harris during a 90-minute debate after cutting short his appearance with black journalists in Chicago.
He couldn't last today, and he was sitting down. Imagine him standing up for 90 minutes against, frankly, a real grilling by a real prosecutor.
During the 36 minutes Trump was in Chicago, he noted several times event organizers were 30 minutes late getting started. Trump had to leave Chicago to head for Pennsylvania on Wednesday, the first trip to that state since the July 13th assassination attempt in Butler. He spoke for 90 minutes there in front of thousands.
No matter how much Kamala Harris tries to change her image, she cannot change this fact. She is the most extreme liberal candidate in the history of our country by far. She's an extreme radical left lunatic.
Pritzker continues to make national news as a possible running mate for Harris. The Democratic National Convention begins August 19th in Chicago. Meanwhile, Illinois is suffering from rising unemployment and poor credit ratings. Jim Talamonte reports.
Governor J.B. Pritzker told the AFL-CIO this week that Illinois is the most labor-friendly state in the union.
We invested in education, and as a result, we are in the Midwest, we are number one for workforce development across the entire center of the country.
Illinois had a June unemployment rate of 5%, which is higher than any of the states bordering the land of Lincoln. Missouri and Indiana had rates under 4%. Iowa and Wisconsin were under 3%. Bryce Hill, Senior Director of Fiscal and Economic Research at the Illinois Policy Institute, says the numbers are extremely concerning. He says the state's credit rating remains perilously low.
Compared to other states, Illinois' credit rating is dead last in the nation.
I'm Jim Talamonte.
Those are the top stories from the past week from Illinois. Find more online at thecentersquare.com. Coming up for Illinois in Focus, I'll join the Center Square's Brett Rowland to further discuss the news. This is Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop.
Do you know what elected officials in Illinois are doing with your tax dollars? Do you want to make sure that your voice is heard? If so, then you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch how your elected officials make decisions, hold them accountable for their actions, and be a more informed citizen. Blue Room Stream is the perfect way to get involved in the democratic process and to make a difference in your community. Subscribe today at blueroomstream.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Brett Rowland, investigative reporter for the Center Square, filling in for executive editor Dan McCaleb, who is traveling this week. Joining me today is Greg Bishop, associate Illinois editor and senior Capitol Bureau reporter. How are you, Greg?
Well, it's almost Friday. We're recording this on Thursday, and I think I still am suffering from whiplash over the past 3 weeks worth of news that's just been unrelenting. And how quickly things change.
Things certainly have been busy, and we have had a lot of national news right here in Chicago, including a visit from former President Donald Trump. Greg, what can you tell us about Trump's visit?
So first off, it started late. We thought we were going to open up at noon and hear the president take questions from the National Association of Black Journalists, but it didn't actually start until after 1 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. So once they did get started, it was clear that it was going to be a raucous interview. The first question was about Trump's previous rhetoric and his characterizations of individuals that people may have thought of as offensive. Well, he was offended by that question and didn't hold back. In a calm fashion, he called the questioner rude and said he'd never experienced that type of rude questioning. He also mentioned how the organizers were 30 minutes late to getting the presentation together. And then it just went on from there. Trump then essentially stole headlines after Vice President Kamala Harris had a large rally in Georgia earlier this week. But after Trump made comments about Kamala Harris's race and ethnicity, that really just took off across the country with all kinds of reaction to those comments. But the conversation, even though it wasn't the hour that we had expected, it was about 36 minutes, and it talked about a range of things. Everything from the economic impacts of inflation on minority communities and the black community to how the border situation and non-citizen migrants coming into the country are impacting jobs and the availability of jobs. But the former president also having to defend his vice presidential pick and also having to talk about even the issue of police immunity, which is something else we'll touch on here in a bit. But Brett, what was really fascinating was, again, how Trump's outing here on the first question or the second question dominating the headlines when he questioned the ethnicity of Kamala Harris. Is she an Indian woman from India, or is she a black woman? And you've got him speculating both, right? As to her switching her race. And that had a lot of people reacting, including Kamala Harris, who said that this is the same show from Trump. She said that it's something that Americans don't deserve. It's disrespectful. And even Governor J.B. Pritzker on the national circuit telling CNN that Trump is a homophobe, a xenophobe, and had a whole bunch of other disparaging comments for the former president. So I guess you could say it's in true Trump fashion that he has these kind of combative conversations with journalists in such a public forum.
Greg, you mentioned qualified immunity and the recent police shooting in Illinois. Trump was asked to weigh in on this. What did he have to say there?
Yeah, so the question, of course, was about Sonia Massey, a woman from Springfield who on July 6th called police in the early morning hours for assistance. She had a suspected prowler that she was concerned about, and some Sangamon County Sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene responding, and they go into the house and they're asking some questions and maybe for some ID. But then police body camera footage that's been released shows one of the sheriff's deputies after confronting Massey about a pot of boiling water. He ended up shooting her in the face, and she died. And the body camera footage is horrifying to watch, but the deputy was ultimately relieved of duty and charged with murder. So, a pretty big national story. About a week and a half ago, President Joe Biden put out a statement sending condolences to the Massey family, saying there needs to be justice. But President Donald Trump hadn't really waded into this at all until Wednesday in Chicago in front of the National Association of Black Journalists, being asked about this in reference to his stance on police qualified immunity. So Trump, when he was asked about it, he said he hasn't seen all of what the story is, but what he has seen he doesn't like. When pressed on the issue of qualified immunity, he said that this case likely wouldn't fit into his understanding of qualified immunity for police. He then talked about all of the shootings that have happened in Chicago, especially several weeks ago, Brett. Surely you saw those headlines of more than 100 people shot, 17 killed. I think actually it was 19 that were killed that weekend. And he said that police need need the respect back from the community, and he believes that qualified immunity could do that. But when it comes to the Sonia Massey case, he says that he hasn't seen all the details, but it doesn't look good, and that qualified immunity isn't for people who are evil. It's, the former president said, qualified immunity is for those who make innocent mistakes in trying to protect the public. So an interesting kind of sidebar there for the former president addressing something happening right here in central Illinois in Springfield.
In addition to all this national news, there's quite a bit of state news as well. And some of it dovetailed with other national news as well. But one of those big ones was medical debt, which we heard Kamala Harris talk about this week, and also J.B. Pritzker. Tell us about what's going on here.
So earlier this year, Governor Pritzker, during his State of the State and budget address, this is way back in February. It's kind of hard to believe that we're already in the early parts of August. But the governor made relieving medical debt one of his key issues this year. And they were able to approve in the state budget that started July 1st around $10 million of state's money, taxpayer money, to work with a nonprofit entity that buys medical debt for pennies on the dollar. So the governor and supporters of this said, hey, we're gonna use $10 million of taxpayer funds to buy $1 billion of medical debt over several years. Pritzker said the program could help tens of thousands of Illinoisans struggling with medical debt. But also Illinois has taken steps to ensure that individuals' credit scores aren't impacted by medical debt. This is another measure separate from the budget that passed, ultimately laying out that an individual in Illinois shouldn't have their credit impacted if they have medical debt. So when the governor advanced these measures and signed the budget, there was conversations with some people questioning whether or not paying off medical debt in this fashion actually helps in the ways that the advocate says it helps. You had advocates saying that relieving medical debt and making sure that it doesn't impact their credit helps with people's credit, but also helps with their own mental health. But some studies have shown that that's not necessarily the case. Regardless, those measures in Illinois have advanced and are in place. But those types of measures are also something that the vice president, Kamala Harris, who's the presumptive nominee for Democrats. Again, Brett, you and I are going to be on the ground in Chicago August 19th for the Democrats' National Convention, where it'll be official. But as the presumptive nominee, Harris said that medical debt shouldn't be included in the credit score. So she seems to be signaling a national position on this. So clearly this is something that Illinois has done that maybe could be part of a national Democratic platform when we see that surface later on this month in Chicago.
That's right. We'll be braving the Chicago traffic together for the Democratic National Convention. Greg, there was also some more state news. Pritzker signed a labor bill and has been talking up the state's economy, but the economic numbers don't look that good.
Yeah, this is something that reporting on Illinois for 10 plus years, and I'm sure you've seen these numbers consistently as well for the land of Lincoln. Even after the recession of 2008, you had Illinois lagging the entire country in rebounding. It seems to be similar with the COVID recession. I know it wasn't necessarily an official recession, but because of COVID, the economy definitely took a hit. But it took Illinois a certain amount of time to get back to pre-COVID economic conditions. Well, this week, the governor, he went to the AFL-CIO conference in Chicago and took an opportunity to be in front of the labor movement and signed a bill that really the bill, what it does is it says that employers can't force employees to sit through meetings of political or religious nature. When you get down to it, it's a bill that's backed by the unions that says that you can't have anti-union rhetoric at mandatory meetings for businesses. If a business is found with doing this, they could be fined $1,000 per instance. So the governor signed this at the AFL-CIO event this week, despite business groups having previously said that this could be a prohibition of constitutionally protected speech and could face lawsuits, let alone opponents saying that it takes away the voice of employers. So the governor signs this in front of the labor group, but before he signed it, he talked about how Democrats are retraining Illinois' economy to be focused on the worker. But over the past few years, Illinois has not done better economically when compared to other states, including neighboring states. Illinois' unemployment rate and Chicago's unemployment rate, 5%. That's almost a full percentage point higher than the national average of 4.1%. And you look at some of the surrounding states, you've got unemployment rates that are under 4% and under 3% for some of them. So, while the governor touts Illinois' economy focused on the worker, we've long had Republicans in the super minority at the state house tell us regularly that it's Illinois' business climate that hurts. So when you have all of these regulations and the costs on business owners and employers, they're not going to expand and create more jobs. You're actually going to have contraction, as we hear from Republicans pushing for fewer restrictions. I mean, we also have the news that they're announced layoffs at places like John Deere and Lion Electric and a variety of other places where the expansion of their positions not happening in Illinois. So all of these factors involved, including the credit rating and Illinois' unfunded pension obligations, when you put all that together, it begs the question of, is Illinois' economy as strong as Pritzker portrays it to be in front of his political allies? But Brett, all of this also, not to even mention Illinois' struggling population, where you've got year after year Illinois among the states that continue to lose population. So there's all kinds of factors involved here. But when you have politically motivated speeches in front of political allies, sometimes you got to take a step back and actually look at the numbers that are on the table.
There was also some Medicaid news this week. Pritzker has signed new legislation to expand who gets covered. Is that correct?
Well, this is actually, it's not legislation. It's a waiver that the federal government approved. So Medicaid, of course, a federal program that Illinois participates in. They use some Illinois taxpayer dollars with matching federal taxpayer dollars, and Medicaid, it's a big budget item. We're talking billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer funds involved in this, and it's helping with medical coverage and assistance in those particular capacities. But the state did receive federal approval of what's called the Healthcare Transformation 1115 demonstration waiver. This coming through the federal government, signaling that approval. And what it does is it allows for the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services to expand taxpayer-funded Medicaid coverage for a variety of things. For instance, this is going to cover the expansion of services for those who are incarcerated, getting ready to get out of prison. Illinois is going to be one of the first states to provide reentry services for individuals being released. It also includes coverage of pre-release services that can begin up to 90 days before somebody's released. There's going to be expanded coverage for community-based services and non-medical transportation. Expansion of employment services will also be covered. But something else that's new here with this expansion is they're looking to expand how Medicaid dollars can be used in violence intervention. And this is another interesting aspect here. Again, increasing Illinois' Medicaid spending, taxpayer spending on Medicaid, to help with victims services or to help with violence prevention efforts. So all of this, of course, could cost billions of dollars. I did reach out to the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services to find out how much the expansion is going to cost taxpayers, but I did not get back a number or a response. But obviously, I think that's something that we'll have to keep on, so taxpayers know how their Medicaid dollars with an expansion in Illinois is going to cost them.
That'll be another story that the Center Square follows. The other big news from this week involved an Illinois Senator, Dick Durbin. Tell us what Mr. Durbin's up to in the Capitol.
So, he's been one of the coercive voices in a bipartisan fashion wanting to get to the bottom of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, where former President Donald Trump survived an attempted assassination. One man did die in that shooting, other than the shooter, but a couple of others were wounded in that. And how could that have possibly have happened? Of course, the senior senator from Illinois, Dick Durbin, he is also the majority whip for Democrats, and he chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. Well, after the shooting, right before the Republican National Convention really got underway, Durbin held a news conference unrelated, and he talked about the need to get to the bottom of this. And this hearing that happened this week with the Judiciary Committee follows last week Kimberly Cheadle resigning from the Secret Service. And that was after a House hearing that just really didn't get any answers. But Durbin helped lead a joint committee hearing this week, about 4 hours worth of substantive questions. I guess it depends on who you talk to, whether they got the answers they were looking for. But you had the Secret Service acting director there, Ronald Rowe, taking questions. But you also had a deputy director from the FBI taking questions from senators, both Democrat and Republican, frustrated with the lack of clarity, frustrated with the lack of transparency, frustrated with the lack of accountability, upset that they couldn't get answers to why they didn't have their anti-drone systems up. We learned about the shooter in this case, putting up his own drone day of July 13th, and the timelines as well that were pretty revealing during the committee, highlighting where some of these lapses really occurred. Durbin, he of course opened the hearing with his line of questioning. He talked about how the shooter was suspicious for quite some time before the first shots rang out because officials saw him with a rangefinder, and he was asking the Secret Service director, well, what's a rangefinder used for? And why was that not enough to, get more eyes on this individual and to stop them from doing anything nefarious? And he didn't really get many clear answers on that. But Durbin was clear, saying that they need to get some confidence in the Secret Service. They need to get confidence in the Secret Service because of the Democratic National Convention that's coming up August 19th in Chicago, where there's going to be some high-ranking political leaders all converging on the Windy City for the Democrats' convention. So he's looking for answers and ensuring that any lessons they could have learned from July 13th they implement to keep that event safe, let alone the countless events between Trump and Harris that are expected now.
That's right, Greg. It seemed like there was just a cascade of failures there. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, if we still have a minute, is to run down what you've learned about security for the upcoming Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
If it's going to be similar to the Republican National Convention, there are going to be noticeable security perimeters and multiple perimeters. And you've also got Chicago police announcing late last week about how they are, bringing in outside forces from even Milwaukee, where they had the RNC. So there's going to be a large police presence, just as there was in the RNC. But Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling said you can only have a successful convention if not just the convention is secure, but the entire city's secure. Outside forces, federal forces, are going to be securing the perimeters of the United Center and McCormick Place, while you've got Chicago police ensuring that the rest of the communities in more volatile areas are secure. So I think the security apparatus is going to be well visible from the land to the river to the lake, all the way to the skies. It's going to be rather interesting, Brett, and I'm looking forward to being on the ground with you.
All right. I think that's all the time we have for today, Greg. Thank you for your insight into all these important stories. Listeners can keep up with these stories and more at thecentersquare.com.